Hey everyone, how's it going? Colin from Gaming Through the Ages here, and today I wanted to try out a little bit of a different video format. Normally on my channel I have two main types, right? I have the video game review and I have a few video game discussion videos in which I've written stuff out on a script, I read it, I put some random gameplay footage on top of it, maybe it relates to what I'm talking about, maybe it doesn't, and then I go. And I decided that I wanted to do something a little bit more unscripted, a little bit more organic, still thinking my thoughts through, of course, but this kind of more connection between me and you. And something that I've always wanted to talk about on this channel are different thoughts that I've had about retro gaming. What is retro gaming? Why one might want to get into it? What challenges we face as retro gamers? And things of that nature. The channel is called Gaming Through the Ages, not because I want to play all the historical video games or because I'm going from the NES to now, but more because I am a gamer that likes games from all different ages, from the NES to the SNES to modern day. So let's get started. And the first thing I want to talk about, what precisely do we mean by retro gaming? Because I think to a lot of people, retro gaming means something like, I only play old games. Only games that have to have an RCA adapter or some kind of analog output, that's a retro game. So people who are retro gamers, they'll play NES, they'll play SNES, they'll play Genesis. And to an extent, yeah, that's true. That is what the retro means, right? I think that we can fairly certainly have a demarcation between the HD systems that primarily use HDMI output and analog systems. There's some fuzziness, of course, the Wii and the Xbox 360 and the PS3. That's kind of a dividing line where the Wii is still analog, the 360 started out as only analog but was outputting HD resolutions, things like that. There's definitely some cases that don't fit that demarcation, but by and large, it works. The reason why I don't identify myself as a retro gamer is because to me, I play games throughout the entirety of gaming. I play games now, I play games back then, and I don't see it as, well, now I'm going to be playing a retro game, or now I'm going to be playing a modern game, at least for the most part. To me, it's all just games. The beauty of the medium that we enjoy is that more and more games just keep being added. And if you put in the time and effort, you can unlock, so to speak, you can unlock this sort of treasure trove of games from the past. So why might one want to get into retro gaming in the first place? And I think that the most interesting aspect about playing games on older systems and things like that is the fact that, let's say you get into a genre, platformer genre. On modern systems, you have some oldies that are put on there, right? The Switch has Nintendo Switch Online, so you can play some of the old Mario games, some of the old Donkey Kong Country games, and different online stores have different re-releases. But by and large, if you're speaking only about modern platformers, you have Super Mario Odyssey, you have A Hat in Time, you have the Sackboy game, you have some stuff, but you can get through that pretty quickly if you really wanted to. Or even take like Psychonauts. Psychonauts 2 came out, everybody loves that game from what I've seen, but it's a sequel to a game back on the Xbox. Luckily, it's easy to play because of Game Pass, but still. So if you get into playing on older systems, you can unlock platformers that have never been re-released. For example, this isn't a game that I've played, but Glover. Glover's never seen a re-release. I think there might be a PC release that was developed back then, but has never really been made available to the public, and you shouldn't play that version. Glover is a very unique game that, unless you have access to PS1 or Nintendo 64 titles, you wouldn't really be able to play. And the reason why I bought this was so that I could give it a try one day, because it's very interesting to me. Retro gaming, or classical gaming, one might say, allows you to really experience the breadth that a genre has to offer. The same thing goes with RPGs. I played Dragon Quest I on this channel, and while I had some frustrations with the game, I could also see how that lit a spark that gave birth to my favorite genre of all time, and it's why I want to go back and I want to play some of the other Dragon Quest titles to see how it evolves. And that's something else that I think classical gaming really allows us as enthusiasts to do. It's to develop a sense of historical progress. Take The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. I have my copy right here. And, you know, as a kid in middle school, everybody was telling me, Ocarina of Time, that's the best Zelda game of all time. It's not even a thought that you don't hear expressed today. I mean, a lot of people just think Ocarina of Time is amazing. I'm going to be honest with you, though, if you have no other background to Zelda, if you just jump into Ocarina of Time because of the progression of time, because a lot of the things that Ocarina of Time had done first have become standard now, Ocarina of Time comes off as really standard. It's good, but it's not great. But you play Legend of Zelda on the NES, then you play Legend of Zelda A Link to the Past, then you play Link's Awakening on the Game Boy Color. Or I should say Game Boy, but it has the DX re-release and all of that. All of a sudden, you have this conception of what a 2D Zelda is. You see how the exploration works. You see how the dungeons work. You see how the items work. That's what Zelda is. That's what Zelda was. And then you play Ocarina, and you see how all of the concepts that had worked in 2D Zeldas are now adapted to a 3D plane. You see how the world building of the Zelda universe was increased, especially in the early hours of Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time goes from being a standard adventure that's not really all that remarkable to this amazing expansion of the core of the Zelda formula. Doing it that way, I found that I really appreciated it a whole lot more. And that remains true for a lot of different series. You play through the Final Fantasy games, for instance, and you can see how gameplay systems and the sophistication of storytelling increase from entry to entry. The last point that I want to touch on is how classical gaming, playing old games, gives the player flexibility. If you only play modern games, games that you can go to Walmart or GameStop and take off the shelf, you're dictated by A, what the market currently actually has, and B, the current systems that are available. And yet, as we've talked about in the beginning of this video, there are so many other games that still maintain their value, that are still important to play, that you can't really get. With classical gaming, there are a multitude of different ways that you can actually approach these games. For most people, software emulation is the way to go. It's easy to set up. You just download RetroArch, or you download another emulator on your computer or another device that can support it, and there you go. Myself, I prefer to either use original hardware or, in some cases, FPGA-based consoles. For example, as you can see above me, I have my NES. The NES is a very finicky machine, so I prefer to use the analog NT because that is, it's more reliable, it reads the cartridges better, I can hack it and load ROMs on it and stuff like that. Similarly, there are different ways to get the games. As you can see behind me, I like to collect physical games. Over there is where more of my cartridges are, here's more disc-based things. On the whole, though, having a collection, it feels good. And then you can have the feeling of taking your original disc and putting it into your original system and maybe playing it on a CRT or an HD TV, depending on what you want, and have that authentic experience. It's something that really appeals to me. But we have to look at the bigger picture. Have you seen the prices for old games on eBay lately? Ever since COVID hit and people with money realized, oh shit, I can buy old games now, these things have skyrocketed in price. And therefore, we have to make adjustments to our habits and to the decisions that we make in order to acquire older games. Personally speaking, I prefer the feel of original hardware over necessarily having the original game. So I've begun to invest in things like flashcards or optical disk drive emulators that allow me to put games on an SD card and then run it on original hardware. For the most part right now, I'm using that for things like fan translations. That's another topic I want to get into one day. But look, for example, I have a Super Nintendo EverDrive, the FX Pack Pro. I don't want to spend $400 on Earthbound. It's not worth $400 no matter how the game is. Yet when I want to play Earthbound, I do want to play it on original hardware. There are other ways that you can buy Earthbound. For example, Nintendo included it on the SNES Classic. You can also buy it, of course, on the Wii U eShop. So I have a multitude of ways that I could play it. But really, what's stopping me from taking the ROM off of this SNES Classic and putting it on a flashcard and playing on real hardware? I have access to the ROM on here. It's a thing that I purchased. I should be able to do with it what I want. Now, of course, there I am saying the words should, not can, not am able. We have to face the fact that acquiring ROM packs, acquiring ROMs of old games, technically, it is illegal. People like to hide behind the idea of video game preservation to give the piracy of old games a moral veneer. It is important for me to download these games because I am contributing to the preservation of this medium that I enjoy so much. Personally, that argument doesn't really hold water for me. Preservation is something done by, say, the Strong National Museum of Play, archive.org, organizations that are dedicated towards the proper preservation and cataloging of things like that. It's the same thing with historical documents. You give them to special collections. You don't keep them in your house. That being said, you can't buy a lot of these games anymore. To me, there's nothing morally wrong with taking an old game and doing whatever you have to do in order to play it on original hardware or play it on an emulator and things like that. Companies these days, for the most part, are not making money off of these games. There are very few exceptions to that. Sony does sell on the PS3 and on the PS Vita PlayStation 1 classics and PS2 classics that you can purchase and download. Of course, it does seem like that's going to go away soon. We've seen how, their stores are probably going to be going away in the near future. At the same token, Nintendo has the Wii U eShop, where you can purchase Virtual Console titles for almost all of their legacy content up to N64. It doesn't include GameCube, but it does include things like Nintendo DS, which is very nice, and also with Game Boy Advance. Personally, I think that if you are going to go ahead and get the ROM so that you can play it on original hardware or whatever, and it's available in an easy-to-access way like that, go ahead and buy it. Even if I'm going to play it in a different way, at least I gave Nintendo or I gave Sony money for that game. But if it's a game that they are not making available, well, that's on them. My core thesis when talking about the use of ROMs in retro gaming is that companies shouldn't make them available for the sake of the consumer, because there are already ways that we can play these games. It's been known since I was in middle school or even elementary school. The reason why Nintendo and Sony and Microsoft should make their old games accessible is because they stand to make money from them. It's in their interest to make these games available to us. And the fact that Nintendo keeps screwing up their own emulation efforts and their ability to make their back catalog available to consumers on the Switch is mind-boggling to me. They could make so much more money just offering us better options with near-perfect emulation, as opposed to asking people to pay a subscription service for a curated selection of games that, at least in the case of N64, is not emulated all that correctly. It provides the player with a choice of value that I don't think really helps Nintendo all that much. But I digress. The important thing is that the player knows how and where to experience the past of gaming. And that's really what I want to get at this video. That gaming has a past. And if you are a real gaming connoisseur, not somebody who just plays the occasional game, but I assume if you're watching this channel, that you like gaming as an art form, that you like gaming as a medium. And if you really want to get into that, and you really want to explore the depths of that, you have to play old games. It's not an option for the enthusiast. It is what defines the video game enthusiast. Guys, if you like this format or you like this discussion video, let me know down in the comments. Leave me a like, hit me with that subscribe button, and all of that. I want to see how this does. I'm probably going to do another video in a similar format like this, but for now, I want to hear what you guys have to think, both about what I've talked about and what you think about this format. I'll see you guys next week for more content from Gaming Through the Ages. Have a great day, everyone.